Welcome back to Food Sports Central, the podcast of the World Food Championships. I'm, of course, your host, Mark Conway, and we are fresh off of the 10th anniversary of the World Food Championships there in Dallas, Texas. And I got to tell you, this year was everything we thought it was going to be and more. We had new additions of things like the Master Judge, the additional competitor going into the round of 10, making it a round of 11. We had the culinary demo stage. We had the Chairman's Reserve sponsored dinners. It was just a packed event that had people from every facet of the culinary world, whether they were executive chefs from Australia to home cooks from Jacksonville, Florida, and everything really in between. And what we saw was the most international competition we've ever had. Teams you look at the burger category alone, you had Japan, you had Dubai, you had Mexico. These competitions were absolutely packed with the best in the world. So it kind of did put the world in the World Food Championships this year, making the 10th anniversary literally the biggest and brightest we've ever had. So if you missed it, wow, did you miss it? If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, seeing some of these Master Judge panels were mind-blowing. You know, you had the Chris Lillys of the world, the famous Daves. You had Harry Sue. You had Michelin star chef Sean Hergat. You had everybody that you could possibly ever want to see. Chef Stephen Piles out of Texas, and you had Chef Nikki out of Texas. You literally had global reach from a competitor standpoint, but also from the Master Judge standpoint. And we had huge movement of some of our biggest names in food sport not moving into the top 10, and really seeing a lot of new faces hit the top 10, well, which this year was the top 11. And then also seeing new names on that category champion board, along with a couple of new categories. So you really got a glimpse of what the World Food Championships can be when we talk about the fact that food is a global language. And what we wanted to do to kick off this next set of weeks as we lead up to some very exciting movement in food sport is we wanted to talk to our 10 category champions. And our first stop in this culinary gauntlet of champions is the vegetarian category. And the vegetarian category was a category a lot of people didn't know quite what to make of it. You know, it's kind of like when people go to a restaurant and they see vegetarian or they see vegan or they see different things on a menu, they're just not really sure where they're at unless that's the world you live in. Well, I can tell you from the Master Judges conversation alone, this was the toughest category they felt to judge, because the skill level, the artistry, the use of ingredients was astounding. Master Judges from 1 through 5 on that table, every single one of them said this was definitely, number one, the hardest one they had to judge, but number two, the one they wish they could just judge every single time. That tells you something about the quality and the amazing technique used by our competitors. And so at long last, I want to introduce you to the World Vegetarian Champion for 2022, Mr. Casey Jones. How are you, sir?
Mark, I'm doing great tonight. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. So it's good to see palm trees behind you, and it looks like a beautiful night there in Florida.
Sitting outside, enjoying the great weather. It's, I guess, unseasonably warm in that I'm here in shorts and a T-shirt and enjoying every second of it. And, you know, the cold days in the 60s, I like to complain about those because I was born and raised in Buffalo. So, you know what, I earned every one of these warm nights.
I think you did. You know, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and spent about a good third of my life down there. And I remember Christmas Day many times being in shorts and a T-shirt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, I've shoveled enough snow on Christmas Day. And
Yep.
So if Christmas morning is warm and sunny and we look at the palm trees while we drink the coffee, that's just fine with me.
So, you know, I know it's a lot different from when I was there because it's been a good, you know, almost 15 years since I've been in Jacksonville. The food scene has really, really changed down there as business has changed and just kind of the whole mindset down there. What is the food scene like down there in Jacksonville now?
You know what? I think it's great. I will also say we don't go out to eat a whole lot because we're tinkering and cooking and having fun at home. But it's great. You get into St. Augustine, there's some great restaurants down there. You go into some of the more eclectic areas of Jacksonville, like Riverside and Five Points.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just some outstanding restaurants there. And we've got a couple of our favorites. And, you know, even with all the great offerings, we tend to go back to the same ones because it's going to be good. And it always is.
I mean, that's what you do. That's what we all kind of do. So, you know, one of the things we talked, and, you know, as I was leading up on the show about how international the competition was, but one thing that was consistent, that is always consistent about the World Food Championships is that you have a full spectrum of culinary competitors. You have a long-time 30-year career executive chefs. We had teenagers make it into top 10 rounds. So you literally have home cooks, you know, the next generation of youth coming in that are doing some of the culinary schools in high school, all the way to those executive chefs. You fall right in there as a home cook that won a category this year at World Food Championships.
We did. My wife and I are a team. We've been a team since the first time that we entered World Food, and that was after our first competitive cooking, which was in front of 2 million people live on the Gordon Ramsay show, The F Word. So that kind of propelled our competitive juices and got us into this. And, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that our first competition, we were in seafood in World Food Championships, and we came in last. We knew nothing about what we needed to do, about transforming food. It was just such a learning experience, but I don't think that we could be here today if we hadn't had that opportunity and that experience on the first one.
Well, I think that goes for just about everything, whether it's business or sports or personal life. You know, it's the losses where we learn the most. You don't learn quite as much from winning as you do when you lose, because then you start to really, if you're going to succeed, you start to really look at, okay, what do I need to know that I didn't know?
Not only that, but the wins don't mean as much without the losses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we hadn't felt how that stung to think that we did our very best and that was still all that we could do, this win wouldn't be nearly as sweet as it is. And I'll tell you, I think we're still on a high. It hasn't completely sunk in yet because, A, I looked at the dishes that the competitors in our category turned in, and they were phenomenal. B, we had 2 perfect scores and won by a third of a point. And C, I looked at the dishes at the turn-ins from a lot of the other competitions when we were there, and those are amazing. So it's a fantastic event, tremendous talent. I love seeing the creativity. I wish I could taste everybody's, but I'd have to judge instead of compete. So I'm going to have to sit there for a little while.
So, you know, when you went in, now, how many times have you competed at World Foods?
This was our 5th year.
I was going to say, I remember you, we're back in Gulf Shores, right?
Yep. That's where we started.
And that's when I remember you guys being there. That was about real close to the same time that I got started there. Okay. And I think that progression you've made, because now you're a category champion and you won the category vegetarian, which was a very new category, along with the fact it was the first time master judges were involved, and you won with perfect scores and won by a third of a point. I mean, that you're right. That just does tell you, just like the master judges has said over and over again, this is probably one of the closest, most skilled, most beautifully just plated categories they saw all week. And you came out of that on top. And man, to have not just 1, but 2 perfect scores is pretty phenomenal.
We feel very fortunate. It, like I said, my wife Judy is my partner in everything, especially and including FoodSport. And, you know, she has a creativity that is just over the top. We both have good palates. I tend to do a little bit more on the flavor side, and she's the presentation side. But we've worked in the kitchen together so long that we don't have to talk a whole lot. We know each other's moves. Mm-hmm. We didn't know them quite well enough to avoid turning in with only 1 second left in the finals. But however it worked out just fine and wouldn't change anything.
I mean, it absolutely did. And this was, and we talked about this quite a bit from the stage, this was the first year there wasn't a single disqualification by missing the turn-in window. There was a whole bunch of them in that final second. You were not alone, but no one was disqualified by that. And, do you want to be the last second? No. But at the same time, you executed, you got your dish in, and when the turn-in window was closed, you were in and off to the judging.
And I'll tell you what, it's such a mixed emotion when you do that, because there's that sense of relief that you hit the table on time and got it in. But then there's all that second guessing that each of us does, right? Whether it's a home improvement project, whether it's something we cook for our families or cook for competition. Well, what if I would have done? What if I would have done? What if I would have done? If I only had a minute more or 2 minutes more? And you just replay that all day. And then when we got to awards, just sitting there in the tension of the awards after the presentations to the judges in the morning, it's just such a conflux of emotions. But man, it's so much fun. It's so much fun.
It really is. I mean, it's all the stress and tension you can possibly fathom when you're competing, but it's also cooking dishes that you've practiced a million times. You've got your wife as your partner. You've got friends and family that you've kind of created there out of the food sport world. So it's just, you get this entire range of everything, but at the end, it's all positive.
It really is. And we look forward so much to seeing a lot of the same faces every year when we go back. Just meeting up with different folks, meeting new folks. The social part of World Food Championships is really a draw for us, because we do enjoy seeing people that we don't talk to, we don't see during the year. We are home cooks, so we don't really run in the same circles with some of those who are full-time food people. There's others and from all over the country, and as you mentioned before, all over the world, that then we get a chance to see and have the conversations with, and how you've been, and catch up on families and everything else. So in so many respects, it's just such a great event.
It really is. Now, you competed in 2 rounds. You had to do the opening round. And then from the opening round, you went into the top 10 round. Walk us through your 2 dishes from the opening round to the top 10 round.
Yeah, it was a very similar dish. The opening round, we did a double chocolate mousse with a macadamia nut macaron. And it came out just perfect. It got the perfect score, but we felt really, really good about it. We turned in with about a minute, which was wonderful. Turned in, felt good. Awards came that night. We were on top. Mike announced it was a perfect score. We had submitted the recipe on time. So that was 101 was our perfect score, which in the end, I think ends up being the difference, right? If we don't get it on time, we don't win. So we're thrilled to have gotten it on time. Well, then for the second round, we had to infuse vodka. The Kettle One vodka, there was 3 choices. Right. The one that we chose was the peach and orange blossom infused vodka. And so we wanted to figure out how could we get that into our dish. And what we did is infused that into the buttercream frosting for the macaron. And so we made the double chocolate mousse with a peaches and cream martini macaron. So when you bit into that macaron, it would taste, I thought it tasted fabulous. You would have that, we had some peach liqueur in there, or some peach syrup in there. So you got the peachy flavor, but then you got that little bit of vodka finish. So it answered the question when you're done with dinner, do I want a dessert or do I want a drink? And in this one, you kind of got both. And the fact that we turned in last in the vegetarian round, it gave all the judges dessert. Yeah. And let's not let this go by. It was a gorgeous presentation. This was not just, okay, I'm going to plate. And that's the difference. You think about a lot of your protein laden categories, and a lot of times it's a protein, it's a starch, it's a vegetable, it's things like that. With vegetarian, you were literally building these works of art. And it's like you said, that category was super tight in the scores. And because you did what you're supposed to do and turned your recipes in on time, you earned a bonus point. But I got to tell you, I mean, you can't downplay or underplay just how beautiful the dish was. And that's why when each of the judges, those master judges, had all of them in front of them, they couldn't get over how much artistry there was to these dishes. And with you really went above and beyond, where a lot of the judges couldn't believe there was a dessert coming out of vegetarian. Well, we were in the recipe category the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Competed alongside Lydia both years and again this year, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful person. We've wanted to trash talk her, but she's so nice we can't.
No, you really can't.
We just we just love Lydia. Um, but in recipe, that was really wide open. And then when recipe went away and it was vegetarian, it was like, okay, vegetarian is still wide open, but we can't use any animal products.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things was you talked before about recipe development and practice. The double chocolate mousse, we've always made that with gelatin, but gelatin is an animal byproduct.
That's right.
So we had to learn to make that with agar-agar for the thickener, which is actually a seaweed extract.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to keep it vegetarian. It worked, and it all worked out in the end.
So let's back up a little bit. You get to Dallas this year. It's the 10th anniversary. There's all these kind of news things going around. Vegetarians, you're now your category. What was it like when you first walked into Kitchen Arena, and how did that kind of differ from your previous years?
It's interesting in Dallas, in Orange Beach, which is where we started. You were so concerned about heat and humidity.
Mm-hmm.
That had a huge impact because it was outdoors under a tent. There's still some of that in the Dallas location, but we've also competed at Fair Park where you were subject to the elements again.
Yep.
Heat and humidity. In Fair Park, it's a little bit different. It's not completely climate controlled. I will tell you that knowing that all the equipment was brand new because we had elements in the oven and had to have perfect temperatures and perfect times and everything else, that was wonderful to see. I love the layout in there. We time how long it takes to walk from where we're set up to get to the turn-in table, so we know. And I can tell you we were that plus 1 second on the finals this year. But that's just a great location with so much opportunity. It changes every time, and it's really fun to see.
It really is. And then you had your first round. You came out on top. You really knocked it out of the park. What kind of was the thought and the feeling going from round one into the top 10 round, knowing now you're one of 11 competitors that could, that are going, so one of you is going to win this category. What was it like? Did you even think about, man, I need to rethink my finals dish? Or did you just say, no, I'm tried and true. This works. This is what I'm going to do. And just kind of what was your feelings going from the opening round to finals, knowing you were that much closer?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting is it was such a different feeling being in the lead than having to come from behind. In the past, we've been in 7th, we've been in 4th, maybe 5th. We've had a few top 10s in the first round before. But you know what? Then you're chasing. Then it's like, okay, you know what? If I fall, it's okay. But if I chase and move up the ladder here, and we've done that a couple times, that in itself is a victory. When you're on top, and in golf, they talk about sleeping on the lead, like Scotty Scheffler this year at the Masters, sleeping on the lead on Saturday night, and how tough that was. Oh my gosh. It was a totally different mindset because there's no place to go but down.
That's right.
And it was, I guarantee, a sleepless night. It was a restless day after turn-in because, you think about what could I have done different or better. And then the other challenge that we knew was that we did a very similar dish from round 1 to round 2. Round 1, we had 30 minutes more, and we only had to turn in 5 tasting portions. Finals was 30 minutes less and 10 tasting portions. So it was a much bigger challenge in less time. And we had actually increased the degree of difficulty with what we were making and how we were going to do it and turn in.
Yeah, there was definitely, I think that was kind of what you wanted to do. For when you go from opening round into your top 10 round, you expect that these are the best of the best. So it needs to be a little more challenging. It needs to push those boundaries a little more. And you really did. But it also kind of benefited you to stick with your dish that you knew the blueprint for, because the master judges didn't really see the round 1. So they weren't really a part of the opening round. So they're really seeing that dish for the first time when it sits in front of them up there on the table. So now you've made that cook in the top 10 round where you just beat the window by a second. What was it like knowing that you're not going to be waiting for an eat score? You're literally, we're going to sit in front of, with all the other competitors, that panel that was up on that elevated stage with the caliber of people you were sitting in front of.
I because of my background and history and all, I've done quite a few interviews and things. So the being in front of a microphone and presenting part of it, that didn't bother me. What worried me the most, though, was the food knowledge that was on that stage that was going to be able to ask questions, what they could bring. Did I know the answers? Could I represent what we turned in well enough? And then the hardest part is when there aren't questions.
Yep.
Because you want them to say, what's the inspiration? How'd you do it? What about this technique? So you can show everything you know and everything went into the dish. But they were up there pretty quiet and eating what we had served and enjoying it. And you walk away from that and go, I hope that silence was because they liked it. Actually, they loved it, as opposed to, well, they just discarded it and moved on to something else. And it took, 8 or 9 hours later before we knew that.
That's right. Well, I could tell you that the resounding comment over and over again were how stunning the dishes were, how flavorful they were. But each one of them felt, because I kind of asked that afterwards, you guys were a lot more quiet than some of the other panels have been. And they said, in this particular category, the food really spoke for itself. In other categories, there was a lot of, why did you do this? And what'd you think? And those sometimes stem from a lack of harmony on the dish. Like when you taste the dish, or you're trying the dish, or you're listening to how the dish was constructed, you're not getting that harmony. It's kind of like listening to a song where the beat doesn't match. That's where a lot of those questions were coming from. But with this particular category, everything really flowed together beautifully, and they just loved those dishes. So we talk now, we're 8 or 9 hours later, and he calls everybody up front, as Mike likes to do, and he starts going from 11 down. As you hear each name get called from 11, 10, 9, 8, so forth, and your name still hasn't been called yet, and you're getting closer to a 1 in 5 chance, a 1 in 4 chance, a 1 in 3 chance. What was it like to stand up there and see and hear all the other competitors, their names are getting called? What was it like for you standing there all the way to the final 2?
Yeah, it truly nerve-wracking. And a really special moment for me was this, when it was the final 3, and it was Lydia to my right and Brittany to my left. And I know how great of cooks they are. And last year I was in the top 3 with Lydia. Last year I think she was on my left and the eventual winner on my right. And when it got to the top 3 and we're standing there, I looked over at Lydia and I said, Lydia, I've seen this script before. I know how it ends, and I'm not real confident. And then she ended up being the next one called, and it was down to Brittany and I. And that was the same situation where just absolutely as nervous as could be, because I know how good Brittany is and how good her dishes are. And the fact that, and I think that her, Lydia, and Judy and I all got perfect scores in the final. It took a perfect score in the final for us to win, on top of a perfect score in the beginning, on top of turning the recipe in on time. So, man, it was just very, very nerve-wracking, very surreal at that moment. You hear, I won, and I don't even know what the right reaction is, because it's just so overwhelming that amongst that much talent, a home cook can come through and just eke out a win and start getting ready for final table.
All right. Eke out a win is seriously downplaying what you did there. You knocked
3/10 of a point, Mark.
But you knocked out perfect scores. Like you really, in a category that was that hotly contested, you continued to knock out perfect scores. You knew your dish, you had practiced, you put together something that was a symphony, and you executed. I mean, you didn't eke out. You did your thing, and everybody else just fell short. And that's,
well, thank you.
I mean, it's when you hit perfect scores, it's not like you finished with a 96 and somebody finished with a 94. You did everything you were supposed to do, from turning the recipe in on time all the way through perfect execution. And a panel of master judges that were just floored with a dessert dish coming out of vegetarian. So now you're the champion. You're the 2022 vegetarian world champion. And you have next up in the food sport world is you've got Final Table. That is one of the best parts of Final Table. It is a mystery. It is something that has been labeled many, many times as a culinary gauntlet requiring multiple skill sets, totally different sets of abilities that maybe you currently have right now. There's a lot of unknown, but that adds to the mystique of the Final Table. But I think that's where you need to be to become win the whole thing and become the world food champion. You've got to be able to overcome adversity, inside and outside the kitchen. So what is your thought process heading into, I need to prepare for everything that I don't know?
Yeah, and the hard part is sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And so it's figuring that out. We sous chefed for Morgan Cheek a couple of years ago when he was at Final Table. So at least we've gotten a peek inside behind the curtain to know a little bit about what you have to do, how it's going to work. Now, I know it changes year to year, but at least having been in that arena, I feel like we go in just knowing a little bit. We like to do multi-course meals. And we did one Tuesday night, had some friends over, everybody throws in a few bucks, and we did high-end seafood and did some really fun and creative stuff there. So we'll do more of those with friends and family to try to, hey, how was this dish? How was that dish? Those types of things. And then that'll give us a little bit of feedback, just a base, because all you can come in now with is a base until we find out more of the details. So just continue to hone the skills and improve and try new things and see where it takes us. And then once announcements are made and we can practice whatever we can practice, we're gonna get sick of eating that stuff. I'll tell you that.
I am very sure. I've heard that from many, many competitors over the years. So is there places on social media where people can follow your journey along?
We have on Facebook, and we're not, because we're home cooks and not a big brand or trying to promote, we do have our Miracle in the Kitchen Facebook page, and that's really the main place that we'll post things and what we're doing and things like that. There's an Instagram out there we don't really post to, but the Facebook site is pretty much where you can find us, and it's Miracle in the Kitchen.
And if you tuned in late, we're talking to the new world vegetarian champion, Casey Jones, out of Jacksonville, Florida. And man, you really did have, this is a pretty exciting journey considering where the last 5 years have been inside with the different categories you've been in. And you didn't choose to go into these categories lightly, considering you continue to compete against Lydia. And, she always brings her game up, but you really did. You elevated to the next level. You really showed creativity and an artistry with food that I think the vegetarian category promotes. So I think we're going to see some exciting things when Final Table rolls along.
Well, we're sure looking forward to it. And I know that the caliber of everybody else we'll compete against is just, top of the charts as well. So it'll be great competition. It'll be great fun. It's going to be a great weekend. Just can't wait for the announcement, find out when and where.
Well, guys, this has been another fantastic episode of Food Sports Central, the podcast of the World Food Championships. If you haven't done so already, and why have you not, bookmark worldfoodchampionships.com, as well as liking and following the Facebook and Instagram pages. They're both simply under World Food Championships. You'll always see up-to-the-minute information, schedules, times, deadlines, opportunities to become a competitor at the World Food Championship. And especially during this time of year, you're going to see all the exciting pictures and videos that came out of the 10th anniversary event. And, wait to see anxiously with the rest of us what this year's Final Table will be like. Well, Casey Jones, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And wear that medal proudly as the reigning vegetarian champion. And guys, I look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great weekend.